You know
Huh?
who's not feeling good to go this morning?
Who? Who's that?
Tom Izzo.
Yeah. Holy shit. No,
That was
honestly, think
bad.
about Izzo. Think about being anybody on that staff today and having to deal with Izzo. Like it'll be a
They are
wrap.
a complete train wreck. They are a complete train wreck. So that was the first time that I've sat down and watched them. And I was like, wow, I didn't put together just how bad and how messed up this team is. Like, they don't have a playmaking point guard.
Nope.
They don't have a five that's any good at all. They cannot rebound the ball. They have no kind of rim protection. They can't play Joey Hauser at the five because he couldn't guard you right now. Aaron Henry looks like all of his confidence is completely shot. Gabe Brown is the most inconsistent player I've ever seen in my entire life. There's not one thing on that roster that's working right now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the thought going in was Rocket Watts is going to be the guy. That's what I thought. I thought it was going to be Rocket Watts scoring 20. He'd have some games where he'd be brutal, but for the most part, he'd score 15 to 20 every single night. And he's not a point, which is, I think, okay. I'm not sure it's like ideal, but you can get away without having a point at the point if he's just a scorer, right? If he's a scorer and he's got enough around him. He doesn't have enough around him, number one. And you don't now have a point who makes anybody's life easier on the offensive end. So everybody's got to manufacture their own. And I don't think, earlier in the year we saw it. I think it was in the game in the Champions Classic where they started utilizing Aaron Henry almost as like a point forward, especially in transition. And it worked. But I think it was almost like fool's gold at that point. Like Duke wasn't very good. And you realize that after that game, a lot of people had no idea how bad Duke was at that point. So Michigan State's win against Duke really was very underwhelming.
Yeah, and they were kind of riding on that, the idea that they went into Cameron Indoor Stadium and got a win. But in theory, if you were going to tell me that I would get Rocket Watts as the scorer, you would get Aaron Henry as the facilitator, you have Joey Hauser on the floor, you have guys like Malik Hall and Gabe Brown and these other pieces
like,
that kind of run around them. It's right. Like that makes sense. But whatever it is, I think part of it is they really just can't guard. Like they cannot get stops, and eventually that's just going to beat you down. And I mean, look, Boo Buie lit up Rocket Watts. Dimitri Trice lit up Rocket Watts. Marcus Carr lit up Rocket Watts. Like at some point, he's got to sit down and say, okay, I'm getting my ass kicked every single time I step foot on the court. Like you got to have pride at some point.
Josh Langford is, and we knew this was going to happen. He's a little bit of a shell of himself. He's just been banged up. Hadn't played in a while.
What can you do? It's like that with Jordan Bohannon too. Like you got these guys that have been, they've gone through multiple surgeries. They've missed so much time. You just can't complete at that level after a while. Your body's just not going to be able to support it, and it sucks. Jordan and Josh Langford are both really nice kids, and they're kids that you want to see succeed.
Yep.
And they're just not who they used to be.
Is the problem, again, you go back to it and you say, unto theirself, Aaron Henry's fine where he is. Rocket Watts as your two guard is fine. Joey Hauser as your four man is fine. So I've always said the two most important, and it's not the case anymore, but it used to be where you need a point guard and you need a big. You don't necessarily need a big now, but you do. You do to some degree because you got to defend, you got to rebound. You don't need a big scorer, but you need a big that's going to be able to, protect the rim to some degree, rebound the ball, especially if you're Michigan State, right? If you play for Izzo, you better have that. They don't have that, and they don't have a point guard. So is there any way this season can be salvaged in a sense of not just getting like into the tournament as an 8-9 seed?
I don't think so.
Could they not make the tournament, Rob? How's this one for you? Could Michigan State not make the NCAA tournament this year?
Absolutely. Like we saw what they did last night against Minnesota, right? They were horrific, right? And normally what you would want in this situation are a couple of easy games to be able to find a way to get things right, get your confidence going again. Because honestly, so Tim Miles had Shaka Smart on his podcast the other day. And one point that I thought was really interesting that Shaka made is that he's charted like the deflections that you get, that his teams get in games. And he went back over the summer and he looked, and he found that like the more deflections that they got defensively, the better. Like that always came in the middle of a run, and the points when they weren't getting deflections was when they were getting beat up. And his theory was that okay, when we're getting deflections and we're locked in and we're playing hard and we're playing confident and we're playing together and you're doing all of those cliche things that coaches love to tout. And it shows up where that shows up is deflections defensively because you're there in the right time to make that rotation. You're reading, you're jumping the passing lane, you're locked in, whatever it is. And I don't think that Michigan State has that right now. So the question you got to ask is are these results because Michigan State is a bad team? Or are these results happening because they are a broken team that doesn't have any confidence, that hasn't figured out how to make things work? And I think you could go either way on this one. And the issue that you run into is that you don't have that get-right game. When you play in the Big Ten, it's insane. There's one team in the Big Ten that's outside the top 55 in KenPom. It is ridiculous, the schedule that these teams have to play. So if you're Michigan State, let's bring up their schedule, and let's see who they got coming up next, because there is going to be no point in time where they're going to be able to sit there.
Luckily, they got at Nebraska next. So the battle.
There you go. They're
the battle of the Hoibergs.
That might be the time when they get right. But if you're asking, okay, can Michigan State miss the NCAA tournament? Absolutely. They're not right now.
Wait. We're on the Best Bets pod. Mm-hmm. What are the odds? What are the odds you're giving me whether Michigan State misses the tournament or not?
What odds would I bet it at? I would say I probably need like plus 500 or so, 5-1 odds that Michigan State misses the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, you're probably right. It's worth it at that. You're not going to get plus 500. You're probably going to get, honestly, today, I don't know, plus 175.
No, I think it would be higher than that. But
Really?
It's Tom Izzo. It's Tom Izzo on a team that has they have the pieces to be able to make it happen.
Higher meaning?
Yeah, I think there would be, you would get better odds. I think it would probably be around like plus 300 or plus 400. 3 games into the Big Ten slate, like Tom Izzo, you're not going to get great odds on them missing the NCAA tournament at this point.
That's I think plus 175, something like that.
You got anything on Wisconsin losing and Maryland winning? That's pretty impressive.
You and I were killing turds yesterday, and he comes through. He must have heard you. He must have heard you.
He probably did.
Job. Listen, the only way Maryland's going to win those games is playing tougher. Like, that's what Maryland needs to be this year. They need to be a junkyard dog type of team that just out-toughs everybody. Like, Morcell was a maniac at the end of that game, and it wasn't just him. They just, frankly, in the second half, they punked Wisconsin. And they guarded, and they made it tough. And Wisconsin wasn't getting the easy shots they were getting in the first half, really around the rim. A lot of them came around the rim in the first half. So I was impressed with Maryland's toughness. I'm not worried about Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's that type of team. They're not overwhelmingly good. They're good. They're going to win more than they lose in the Big Ten because they're older, because they know their roles, but they're not that good. Their margin for error is still slim.
I was much more impressed with Maryland offensively than I thought it was going to be. Like, they went through a stretch in the second half where it was 17 minutes left in the half. They were down 34-26, and they went and they scored basically every possession for about the next 8 to 10 minutes against a really good Wisconsin defense. Eric Ayala was making shots. They were able to take advantage of the fact that Wisconsin had the 2 bigs. And so that was the big concern we had with the Badgers coming into the season, right? What happens defensively when you can space them out and Mike Kapata's got to guard on the perimeter and Nate Reavers has to guard on the perimeter. And Maryland, it took a while to get there, but Maryland eventually took advantage of that. The dunk that Dante Scott had on Nate Reavers to put him up by 5 with less than a minute left.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah, Dante Scott was good. They need that, though. They need Morcell. They need Ayala. They need Dante Scott. They need kind of everybody, Jarvis Hamilton, all of them to be 10 to 15 point a game, 10 to 12 even a point a game scores. And honestly, the only way they're winning is close games. And what I worry about is in a close game, who are you giving the ball to make a play? I mean, I don't know. I think this team is better than we think because I actually think Turds is a good coach. I do. I think he's a good coach. I think the biggest problem with Turd sometimes is he's not touchy-feely, so the fan base doesn't love him because that's not his personality. He just wants to coach ball.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a very impressive win, so you got to give credit where credit is due. And, with the way that I've been killed by Wisconsin fans, I'm never, ever, ever going to be upset about the Badgers losing. That's always fun for me.